and I'm going to hit the record button. Okay, we're now recording. So I would like to introduce Claire Johnson. Claire is the president of our NorCal chapter, Mystery Writers of America. She is a UC Berkeley grad, was accepted into a PhD program for history, but decided smartly that she'd rather make people happy by creating luscious desserts. She completed the professional chef program at San Francisco, California Culinary Academy, worked as a pastry chef for 8 years. The passion and frenzy of that are characterized in one of her novels called Beat Until Stiff. She has also written 2 pastiches of Austen novels, the first-person historical and a first-person historical, Pauline Pfeiffer's Marriage to Ernest Hemingway. So with that, I will go dark and be the woman behind the curtain. And I will pass this over to you, Claire. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Lori. I would like to welcome everybody. Good morning. I do exist. I don't know why it's like I was saying earlier to everybody, it's like I'm under some sort of light to confess something, but I am actually here. It's strange. Anyway, I'd like to introduce Howard. I've known Howard for a long time, and I think that his presentation will be extremely helpful as more and more of us find navigating the publishing world to be basically full of alligators. And they're adding more alligators even as I speak. It seems to be very difficult in getting published. So Howard is the president of Let's Write Books Incorporated. It's a company that specializes in providing editing, book design, and book marketing services to independent authors. In addition to helping hundreds of authors self-publish their books, Howard has written and published over 30 books of his own, and his company won a Silver Stevie from the International Business Awards for Most Innovative Company. He's also a former creative director of an award-winning advertising agency. So I'm going to pass this on to Howard, and I can absolutely say I know this is going to be a great presentation because I know Howard. All right, well, Howard, you're on.
Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you, Lori, for having me on today, and thank you, everybody, for joining us for this presentation. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about self-publishing as an option for being published. I want to just start by telling you how I got started in this business, because I think it's important to understand my background and as I came to this. So back in 2002, which is 20 years ago now, I published my first book, and I did so on my own. And that was after trying to find a publisher. I had sent out a couple hundred queries to different publishers and agents, and I just got back a lot of templated rejection letters, which I just found awful. And the good news was that I had a friend who was in the publishing business. He was in a design studio, and he helped me design my first book, and I got that published. And I fell in love with books. I fell in love with the platform for creativity and sharing what I knew about people, what I knew about helping people, because my books are primarily nonfiction and health and wellness oriented. But at any rate, I went on to write more books, and some had some success, some had mild success. None of them were complete failures. And then let's fast forward to 2012 when Amazon came out with Kindle, and Barnes & Noble came out with the Nook, and people were encouraging me to get my books converted. And reluctantly, I did. I converted one of my books to a Kindle book, and there were some advertising options on Amazon, and I tried those. And in that first month, I sold $2,000. I made $2,000 in royalty payments, and my book was #1 in various categories in the top 100 on Amazon. And I'm thinking, holy moly, I think I'm going to convert my other books and go live in Bermuda and just write and convert books to Kindle for the rest of my life. It didn't quite turn out that way, and I had various levels of success with the additional books that I converted. But I realized something very, very important and powerful was happening in the publishing industry, and particularly on Amazon, and that was the digital product, the Kindle book and EPUBs and all that followed. And I wanted to know everything I could about that, and so I took every training. I read every book. I tried to learn everything I possibly could about Kindle and about digital content, and I did. And in those early years, I was actually sought out for my expertise around marketing on Kindle and converting books to Kindle. And that's kind of how I got to start in this business. And then soon after, in 2013, I started helping others get their books published, and the business just took off from there. And since then, I've written a total of 33 books of my own, and I've worked with hundreds, maybe 500-600 different authors in getting their books published as well. So today, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit briefly about why self-publishing, although you may already have your own ideas given the fact that you're on this call, but we'll talk about that for a moment or two. And then I'll go through the major steps involved in actually self-publishing a book and give you some good tips for getting that done. And in terms of questions, if you have questions at the end of each slide that I show, I'll take a question or two, and then we'll move on from there. And at the end of the presentation, if you have a question that hasn't been answered, I'm happy to stick around and answer it for you then as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get started. Okay, so why self-publish? First of all, it's hard to find a publisher unless you have a cousin who is a publisher or an editor, or you are famous, or you have a list of, say, 100,000 people in your database, or you've written the greatest piece of work since War and Peace. It's really hard to find a publisher. And also, every publisher, every agent is getting multiple queries every single day. I mean, there's some editors might get, or some agents might get 100 or 200 queries a day. So how is it that yours is going to stand out? And chances are that it probably won't. And if it's lucky enough to be read, then you may get an offer. If you get an offer from an agent to represent you, then it's going to be months before you get a publisher. So the process goes something like this. You create a, this is to get a traditional publisher. You have to write a proposal, which generally will take you, take you a few weeks to get that done right. If you don't know how to do it, you may need some help, and it could take 2 or 3 months before you get that right. Once you get that done, then the next step is finding an agent. That could take 5-6 months, maybe longer. And then once you get an agent, the agent has to pitch your book to a traditional publisher. That could take anywhere from a month to a year. And then once your book is accepted, then it has to go through the publishing process, and that could easily take a year. So it could be anywhere from a year to 2 years before your book actually comes out. When you self-publish, your book could be out in 3 months. The average time it takes us to publish a book for a client is 10 to 12 weeks, and that includes a proofread edit. If your book came to us that it's already proofread, we can get it done sooner, and we've been able to get books out in as little as 4 to 6 weeks in a tight pinch. So, one of the big things about self-publishing is that you're in control of the timeline, and there's no dragons at the gate. If you want to publish your book, you can publish your book. You're also in control of the content, the design, the distribution, the rights, etc. There'll be no fighting with the editor, no fighting with the designers, no fighting with the publishers. You are in control. Of course, you might have some discussions, which is only natural with your designer or with your editor, but those are constructive. And I tell all my clients, look, I am your guide. I'm here to provide you with guidance and answers. and suggestions, but ultimately the book is yours, so you get to choose. Why this is also important is, let's say 6 months down the road, you want to convert your book to an audiobook, or you want to convert your book into, or translate your book into Spanish or into another language, or maybe you want to change the cover, or maybe you want to change the title, or maybe you want to come out with a second version of the book. All that is going to be really tough. It's all going to be decided by a traditional publisher. On your own, you can do anything you want. So you're going to have a lot more control, a lot more ownership of what happens with your book. Also, today, your book can look as professionally published as any traditionally published book. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to publish a book on your own, you would do something with a vanity press. They're called vanity presses, terrible name, but basically it was the beginning of self-publishing, and some of the designs weren't all that great, and some of the printing wasn't all that great, but that's all gone away. We use the same software traditional publishers use to design books. The designers we use are excellent, and there's a big demand for this type of product now. So everything is very, very professional. Another key point of self-publishing is that you keep all the royalties. So a traditional publishing contract, you might get 10% of the retail price of the book. A book costs, say, $15, you make $1.50 per book against some type of advance. And if you're a first-time author without a huge following, you're not going to get that much to begin with. You know, you'd be lucky to get $2,500 or $5,000, and you know, it's $1.50 against that. So you'd have to sell a lot of books before you start making more money on top of that. But with self-publishing, you're going to make quite a bit more. At Kindle, when your book is priced on Amazon, when your book is priced between $2.99 and $9.99, you're making 70% of your Kindle book. And then the paperback book, you're making about 45%. So if your book is $15, you're going to end up with around $7 for the royalty payment. So this is important because you're going to work hard to write your book, and you're going to work hard to market your book. And if you're doing those things, you might as well get paid for it. Yes, there is an upfront cost. You know, you're going to have to make an investment, but either way, you need to look at publishing your book as a business. It's not a hobby. You might think of it as a hobby, but there is a business side to this. Now, I understand that not everybody wants to write a book, you know, and cares about making money, but you know, many of us do. And if you want a career as an author, then that is important. And you know, I would say when I meet with authors and I ask them, what's most important about your book? And you know, often I hear, oh, I want it to be a bestseller. So I know that many people want to have success with their books. And along with that success comes a monetary concern, a monetary issue. So just keep the royalty payment option in mind, you know, around self-publishing, because you're going to make a lot more money for the same amount of work if you work it. If you're planning on just creating a book and not doing any marketing, or you don't care about selling it, and this happens sometimes, people have books on their bucket list and they just want to write the book, and it's a creative endeavor and they're really not too concerned about making money. That's fine. Then self-publishing is an easy option because you don't have to wait, you know, your 2 years to find a traditional publisher. So also print on demand, which simply means that you print books as you need them, is available to us now. We can print one book at a time, or 100 books at a time, or 500 books at a time, whatever it is that you want, and the price is the same. So in the past, you would have to get a print run done, and that could be 1,000 books, 2,000 books, 5,000 books, and there's a fee for that. You know, you have to pay for all those books at once, and those books have to be stored someplace, usually in your garage if you're a self-published author, and then you have to sell those books. So the beautiful thing about publishing today on your own is that you can do print on demand. And of course, EPUB, the digital format for ebooks, means that you don't have to have any print runs at all. You're not printing anything. You're just distributing digital information. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a moment and see if there's any questions before I go on to the next slide.
No live questions and none in the chat so far. So it's going well. Thank you, Howard.
All right, beautiful. Thank you, Lori. So let's move on now to the first step in deciding about your book, in self-publishing your book, is to determine how marketable it is. I recommend that you write a brief description and test that with friends and relatives. And I know that it could be hard to write a brief description. I mean, no more than a page, a couple paragraphs at most is ideal, just to share the idea with some friends and relatives and get their feedback. It's very casual kind of thing, very informal, but to see what is their reaction. Are they lighting up? Are they saying, oh, that's a great idea, but have you considered blah, blah, blah? You might get some good information that informs you about your book. I also recommend that you test your idea with to your email list, or on social media is another good place. You can share your idea or share a couple ideas and ask people what they like best. Also, what are other top books in your niche doing? Go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go to your local bookstore and see what other top books in your niche are doing. And well, by doing, I mean, what is the subject matter? Are there any themes that you're recognizing? And then once you do that, ask yourself, how is your book different, better, similar, or how does it need to be improved? Here's a pro tip that I have for you. There's a company called SurveyMonkey that some of you might know about, where you can go and create a survey for free and then send the link out, and then you can get some feedback about your ideas. This is a little bit more private than posting it, say, on Facebook, but you can put the link on Facebook and drive people there. You can send the link out to your email list. And I've done this a lot with covers and with titles and subtitles. This can be really helpful. And then another company that I think is really interesting for research is called Pickfu, pickfu.com. And not only will they help create a survey, but they also have a list of people that you could purchase, and they'll send the survey out to those people. So, I mean, you could have sent out to as little, I think, as 50 or 100 people or more, and you can define who you're trying to reach by age and profession and so forth and so on. So those are some good places to get some feedback and research in addition to these more informal places. Okay. So any questions or comments before we go on? Okay, I must be doing a great job of explaining. All right, number 2, create a winning title and subtitle. So your title is the most important element in selling your book. Now, I'll say that traditionally, and by traditionally I mean in the past, there was this idea that a book cover, a book title would be enough, that you don't need a subtitle when you're doing fiction. And I would argue with that. And the reason I would argue with that is because a subtitle describes more about what your book is. So having a title is great, and sometimes titles are obscure. So you need the subtitle to explain what's in the book and set the hook. So we have an interesting title, and then we need to grab the reader's attention by having a good subtitle. So the title should be snappy, it should have drama and make the reader curious. The same thing for the subtitle. And as I said, the subtitle should further describe what's in the book. So what I'd like to suggest to you is that when you're thinking about your book, that you create a few titles and subtitles, narrow them down to 2 or 3 you like, and test them with other people. See what kind of feedback you get. You're going to look for a theme. Everybody's got an opinion. If you send, your titles out to, say, 30 people, what we're looking for is a theme, that maybe 20 people like title A and 10 people like title B. And maybe 5 of those people will have suggestions for you. Maybe some of those suggestions will be helpful. Some of them might not be, but just keep that in mind that everybody's got an opinion. And if you're stuck for your title, you're not sure, ask a fellow writer, an editor, or a professional copywriter to help you so that you have a really good title, something that's going to capture people's imagination and is reflective of what's inside the book. I find at least half the time that I work with authors that they have a good working title. Generally, they don't have a good working subtitle. And the other half of the time, they don't have a good title. So, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but get some feedback from others, because that's what's going to inform you. And we get a little myopic, thinking that we might have, even I, when I create a title for my own work, I run it by others because I can be myopic as well. All right. Any questions or comments before I move on? No? Okay, great. So now let's talk about editing. Editing is really critical to your book, because nothing will kill a book faster than having typos and bad grammar. Once you put your book out into the world, if your book has typos and bad grammar in there, then you're going to get a lot of negative reviews, and those negative reviews will kill your book. So it's really, really important that you do the proper editing. And for most of you, that's probably going to involve some type of line editing and proofreading, and maybe some content editing or developmental editing. So don't be afraid of editing. Good editing polishes your work and takes it to a higher level. And you can't edit yourself. It's impossible. And neither can your partner. Even if your husband or wife is an English teacher, or your neighbor is an attorney, they can't edit properly. You need to have a professional editor look at your work. At the very least, a professional proofreader. But any editor can look at your work and tell you what it needs. And then, any good editor, that is. And then you'll be able to work with them to polish your work and get it in the shape that's proper for publishing. And you can find a good editor by asking other writers, through writing groups like the one that you're in, and you can reach out to companies like mine. Another interesting thing that you can do is share your manuscript with beta readers for feedback. And this would be more for content development than proofreading, which is really designed to catch the typos of grammar, misspelled words, an occasional odd sentence, something like that. So sharing your book with beta readers, or even a handful of people who are close to you, and getting feedback could go a long way in helping you develop your content to be all that it can be. Okay. Any questions or comments about editing? All right, so let's talk about cover design. So next to the title and the subtitle, the next most important element to sell your book is the cover design. This is just really, really important. Here are 4 covers of different kinds of books that my company developed. This book here, Overcoming the COVID Darkness, I realize that this is nonfiction, but it's an example of a really good cover because it stands out and clearly says what it's all about. The little design element at the top makes it interesting. And this book went up in December, and it has sold over 5,000 copies of the book, which is phenomenal in such a short time. And it's been an Amazon bestseller on a regular basis since it came out, and continues to be. So I'm excited about this book. And this book cover here, Victor Nameless, I just love this cover with the double exposure of the man's life that he's experiencing, in exposure, double exposure on his helmet. It just says so much and has so much drama. So it's really, really important that you have a good cover, and this is not a place to scrimp. And you're not a designer, you can't do it. You need to have a professional designer do it, unless in fact you are a professional designer, but it's rare that somebody is a book designer and a good writer. They're different skill sets. So again, I would recommend you go to Amazon, to your niche, and look at best-selling covers or covers of best-selling books, and see if there's any commonalities. And then also we need a back cover description, and this needs to be really sharp. I would say, to get a copywriter to help you, or somebody who's experienced writing descriptions to do that. You can start yourself and share that with a professional copywriter to tighten it up and make it look really sharp. But this is an opportunity to sell your book. So it needs to be short and sweet, but really sharp and motivational to the reader. So you need to spend a little time with that also. So once you get a cover done, like I've been suggesting with the editing and the title, you want to test those covers out with friends and colleagues. And you could do that same thing with SurveyMonkey and PickFu that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so any questions about cover design description? No? Okay, so the next step is, once we have the cover design, going to the interior design. You want this to look as professional as possible, and you want to hire a good designer. So again, another way to find a professional book designer is to ask other writers, people in your writing groups, and reach out to companies like mine. You want to check out their prior works. You want to see samples of what they've done for others. And then once you hire a designer, the first step is to have them create a few design samples of your book. So I recommend that you go into it on a milestone basis. So if you're not connecting with your designer, or they're not producing good designs, being that's the first time you're working with them, you can stop the contract before you spend more money with them and more time. But if you know the person you're working with, or you're happy with those initial design samples, then obviously you can move forward to the full PDF of your entire book. And once you get that, and before you actually go to final files and get the book uploaded to wherever it's going, it's a really good idea to print out the PDF on your computer printer, or take it down to your FedEx store or UPS store and have it printed out, so that you can look it over that way. Because what you see on the printed page is a little bit different than what you see on your screen. We tend to miss things. And often I have clients tell me that, oh, when I see the book in the printed form, I'm realizing that this, that, or the other thing should be in there, or this, that, and the other thing should come out, or I just like it the way it is. But whatever it is, you need to have the option of seeing that. And the best way to do that is to print out your entire PDF and look it over. And not only looking it over for content, but also looking it over, it's your last chance to look it over for any potential typos as well. Now, sometimes people will have, authors will have the PDF reviewed again by a proofreader. So you can have your job proofread when it's in the Word document form, and then also again, once the PDF is done, depending on how many changes you might make. But it's impossible to catch everything. I mean, we can catch 99% of the typos, but when you're working with 50,000 or 75,000 words, there's going to be a few little pesky typos that get through, and this is another opportunity to catch them. So I highly recommend you print out your PDF before you go to final stages with your book. Okay, any questions or comments about interior design? All right, so we're on to...
Yeah.
Oh, great.
How do you put questions on here, in the chat, or do you put your microphone on like I just did?
Yeah, you can just do you can do either or. So while we're speaking, you can ask me a question if you have one.
My question is, Scrivener supposedly can make an EPUB version for you and so forth. Does that work at all, or where does that come in?
Yeah, well, we're starting to talk about EPUB versions right now, and I'm really not familiar with Scrivener. To be honest with you, I've had a couple of authors who have come to me from having used Scrivener, and I think they have their own, if I'm not mistaken, I think they have their own platform for creating a book, which has its pluses and minuses. So generally, when I get a book, we're creating it in a software program called InDesign, which is the industry standard for publishing. And we create something called source files, which are the foundational files, and then we output in different ways. So from that source file, we're outputting to PDF, which goes for printing, or we're going to a EPUB file for ebooks, and that's done either by the designer or a formatter that specializes in that function. So I really can't speak directly about Scrivener and what they do. It sounds like, from what you're asking, it sounds like they have the capacity to do that. I think there might be some drawbacks with using that technology. Isn't, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, isn't this the platform where you're writing right on the screen there?
Scrivener is a writing program.
Yes. Yeah. And then what do you do with it once it's done? Once you're through writing, what do you do with it?
Well, they have a compile thing, and you could compile it into EPUB, PDF, and then I'm not familiar with the compile part totally now, but you can do different formats, and supposedly it gives it the right format that you should have.
Yeah, okay, so yes, so if you're doing, your right formatting through Scrivener, it sounds to me like it's very templated and basic. So, you're going to get a book that looks like somebody else's book, basically. I think it's part of the problem, and then trying to download information from that company into other formats. I personally, I haven't used it. I know there's some glitches in working with it. There's also some benefits in working with it. I like to have more of a creative frame in working with the books and working with books that we handle. So, I can just say good luck and let me know how it goes for you. You can try it and see what you get from it. But remember, your job is to write. Your job is not to create and produce an actual, design. That's what designers are for.
Howard, if I can add two things really quickly.
Yes, please.
We do have a few Scrivener experts in Mystery Writers of America. We've done a small presentation on the use of Scrivener. We're planning to do that again. So we'll make sure that anybody who is on this presentation today is also informed when we do our next use of Scrivener presentation. And I also have one more question from Gerald Elias. He asks, one advantage of traditionally published books is getting free reviews from major trade journals like Kirkus, PW, etc. For self-published books, it seems that you have to pay for a review, often quite a bit of money. Is there a way around that?
Yeah, I wouldn't get so excited about those reviews personally. I've never seen them really do that much. I would not pay, $500 for a Kirkus review. I'd rather put $500 into marketing in other ways and let the reviews on Amazon speak for you. So if your book is well written and you're actively working to get reviews on Amazon, you can get those reviews for free, and there's no need to go outside and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to get those reviews. And basically the reason to have that, those Kirkus reviews and reviews in other places is maybe to get your book in a bookstore, but that's not a be all and end all. If you get your book into a bookstore, it has to sell. If it doesn't sell, it's out. It's out 6 months and it's sent back to you. So I'm not such a big fan of bookstores. And then also in terms of reviews, my clients ask me this all the time, and I tell them not to spend the money on getting those types of reviews.
Howard, I just want to also mention that Scrivener only works on a Mac. So if you work on a PC, the current alternative is a program called Atticus. I don't know how Atticus works, and I work on a PC, but that is one of the limitations. Scrivener only works on Macs.
Oh, well, thank you for
currently.
that. Currently. Yeah, I think that it's probably possible, just like it's possible to get a book done in Word. You could actually create a book in Word. I don't mean the writing, but the formatting, but it's not very pretty. And in terms of Scrivener, I'm sure it's a step up from Word, but it's not a step up from having a designer, create a book that looks appropriately and specifically for your unique writing, So I guess you have to consider that, and I'm sure it's quite a bit less expensive also, to get a book done through a Scrivener and that other company you talked about. But I think that it's possible to end up without any hair on your head when you're done too, with something like that. So
a Scrivener 3 is now available in Windows format.
Is it? Oh, great. Good.
Okay, so, you can certainly try it and you can see what happens. Okay, any other questions?
That's it for now. Thanks, Howard.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about formats and distribution. So the more formats and the more channels of distribution you have, the more possibilities for sales, because there's more eyeballs on your sales materials. So the 4 possible formats ideally are paperback, hardback, EPUB, and audiobook. And of course, the first place to start for distribution, I always recommend Amazon, KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon's publishing arm. And here you could get your print book done and your ebook done as well, or uploaded to these platforms. And 60 to 70% of all books online are sold through Amazon. The next 15% are sold through Barnes and Noble, and then all the other little players fight it out. So Amazon's definitely a place to start. There's also Ingram Spark, which is Ingram is like the largest distributor, wholesaler of books. And they have a publishing arm called Ingram Spark, which is like KDP. And Ingram Spark can be used in conjunction with KDP for ebooks. And you could also put your paperback book or hard book up through Ingram Spark, and they'll send it over to Amazon. But I don't like that because A, it takes time for Amazon to get the books, and B, if you do that, then there's some tools at Amazon you're not going to be able to use to help market your book. So I think from a distribution perspective, Ingram is really good for EPUBs in addition to Amazon, but for the paperback, maybe just keep it with Amazon. The other advantage Ingram has is that they have a couple levels of color books. Most of you probably won't need a color book where the pages inside are in color, but they have a couple options for that. And another company for expanding your distribution for ebooks is called Publish Drive. And they have a unique model where you pay X amount of dollars per month for the distribution. Whereas with Ingram, you're paying a one-time fee to get your book uploaded, and then you're getting the royalty payments. At Publish Drive, you're also getting the royalty payments, but you're paying the monthly management fee. And then ACX is Audio Creation Exchange, which Amazon also owns, along with Audible, which Amazon also owns. But these are the big 3 platforms for audiobooks, and you can distribute your audiobook through ACX. And you can also find narrators at ACX, and there's an option there to share royalty payments in lieu of a fee for narration at ACX, which means that you can get your book done for free, which may or may not be valuable to you. But remember, you'd be sharing the cost, or sharing the royalty payments, so it may or may not be worth it to you to do an audiobook. And I think that a lot of you probably are writing really long books. And if that's the case, then it may be more worthwhile to go this way than to go to hire a narrator. So you can figure anywhere between $300 to $500 an hour for a finished book, and for a finished hour. A finished hour is approximately 9,500 words. So if your book is, say, 95,000 words, then that's 10 hours, that's $5,000. So you really have to think about whether you want to spend that money or not. But maybe you can find a narrator to do that for free, and you share the royalties. So that's an option. You can check that out at ACX.
So we do have a few questions, Howard, if you.
Sure.
Okay. So there are 2. Catalina asks, do you have an option on digital an opinion on digital to digital? They offer many services.
I've never even heard of them.
Draft to digital.
Draft to digital. I should put my glasses on. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
And it's at number 2 in the middle. So
It's a number 2. It's a huge company, and they put you on every platform, and then they have their own. But if he doesn't know them.
No, I'm not aware of them. This is the first I've ever heard of them, so I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, I used them years ago.
Yeah.
And they could put you on every single platform. Also for audiobooks, some of my, I belong to the indie published things and before COVID attended many of their conventions. And apparently I have never tried it, but there is some sort of a bank for audiobooks that since everybody's looking for customers, so they were in 2020, that they will split the profits with you instead of charging you.
Yeah, well, look, the thing is that in order to get these three platforms, Amazon, Audible, and iTunes, are the big three platforms for audiobooks. All the other platforms are small, and most of the sales are made on these three platforms. In order to get onto Amazon, Audible, and iTunes, you're going to have to go through ACX. They have it all wrapped up.
Okay, thank you very much. And the draft to digital, the reason I left them was because I wanted to do some promo with like free books on Amazon.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't do that if you're in any other platforms. You have to
Right.
be just in their platform. But
Right.
other than that, they were very professional and they're very impressive. So they are worth checking out.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll have to go check it out myself.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Catalina. Okay, one more quick question
Sure.
from John Gorhan. He asks, how would you compare yourself to BookBaby? They offer some distribution.
How do I compare myself to BookBaby?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a great question. First of all, I know of almost, in my, let's see, 8 years in this business, I've known only of 2 people that have used BookBaby to have their book done. We offer similar services, but in a very different way. So my business is a boutique business. When you come to me, I oversee every aspect of the book. I oversee every aspect of publishing, and I am holding your hand through the entire publishing process from start to finish. When you go to a large company like that, you're basically put into a pool. You know, you're one of, you know, thousands of authors or hundreds of authors all at the same time. You know, your book is designed by somebody, it's sent to you. You might have a question, or you might have some changes, and you'll send it back, and, you know, maybe a week or 2 later you'll get back your designs, and, you know, it goes into a pool of designers, you know. So my company is very, very personal. It's very hands-on. It's a small company. It stays that way for a reason, because I like to give my authors, I treat my authors like their books are my own. So you're not going to get that from a company like that. And I don't know about their distribution model at all. All I know is that Amazon is the #1 place for distribution. And if they're distributing the book for you, then it's going to limit what you can do with it. Okay, so Amazon provides independent authors with a whole bunch of tools to market on Amazon. Those won't be available to you. So I don't know, you know, I've had people come to me from BookBaby, you know, that have struggled there. So, you know, some of these big platforms work for people and sometimes they don't, but they're not highly personalized, and that's the big difference. So I hope I've answered your question.
I think you did. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, so going on to marketing. So I know many of you have thought about marketing. I also know that many of you haven't thought about marketing, and some of you don't even want to think about marketing. But the reality is that you have to market your book, or your book is not going to go anywhere. It's very few books that break out and become bestsellers without marketing. So I like to say you could have the best written book in the world, but if there's no marketing, it's not going to go anyplace. You could take a good book, not a great book, but a good book, do some marketing and have some success. So it's really critical that you market. You're spending a lot of time writing, but you need to spend some time marketing also. So I'm going to give you some tips. These are foundational tips. These are tips that I would have for most every author. writing, on marketing their book. So first of all, to develop a social presence, and by that I mean pick 1 or 2 social media platforms and use them. It can be very overwhelming. There's so many different platforms out there, but just pick 1 or 2. It could be Facebook and Twitter. It could be Facebook and Instagram. It could be Twitter and YouTube. You know, whatever it is that you like and it seems to connect to your audience, then I would pick 1 or 2 and just use them as much as you feel comfortable using them. Maybe it's a half hour twice a week or a half hour every day. But there's a lot of power in social media. I personally don't like it. I just don't care for it, but I know it can be really, really powerful in terms of connecting with your audiences and helping your book be known. Okay, so join writing groups. You all know that. You know, all of you can be support to each other. You can all market for each other and post to your social media and send out messages to your email list and tell others for each other. And along those lines, developing email list is most important for your long-term success as an author. So how do you develop an email list? Well, one of the best ways is to put an offer in your book for more content. Maybe it's information about one of the characters, or maybe it's the first couple chapters of your next book, or maybe it is something about what happened before the story started. It could be almost anything that might be of interest to the reader. And then you drive them to a 1-page website called a landing page. And on that landing page, you have an opt-in form. So they give you their name and their email address, and in exchange, they get this content. And that name and email goes to a database like at MailChimp or Constant Contact. And from there, you're able to remarket to them over time. You know, when your next book comes out, you can let them know. So if you can imagine, when you start your first book, you don't have much of an email list. Maybe you have, you know, some friends and relatives and colleagues. Maybe you have a couple hundred names. Well, you know, you send an email out to them, letting them know that your book is for sale. So maybe 10% or 20% of those people will buy the book. That's, you know, 40 books, great. But if you had a list of 5,000 or 10,000 names, then, you know, maybe you sold 500 books or 1,000 books out of the gate. So having the mailing list, the email list, is the single most important thing you can do for your long-term success. Another way to help develop your list is to just write a short book. There's something called Kindle Shorts, which is a book of anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 words, but I wouldn't recommend writing 30,000 words. I'd write 5,000 to 10,000 words, put it up as an ebook, and use this as a way of connecting with potential readers. Creating a press release to local and related media is also a good thing to do. Physical or online book launch. You know, having a book done is a big deal. Whether it's your first book or your 10th book, it's a big deal. It represents a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it's an opportunity for you to shine as an author. And now that we're coming out of COVID, it's very, very possible to have physical book launches. I wouldn't necessarily recommend having them at a bookstore, because even though that seems like a logical place, but you know, you're not going to make any money having a book sold at a bookstore, because the bookstore is going to have to buy it either through Ingram or is going to have to buy them wholesale. And by the time it gets through, you'll make, you know, $1 a book. It's not worth your time, but you can look for other venues. You know, if your book is about a florist that is a murderer, then maybe you have you can do your book at a local florist, or you know, something that ties, some venue that ties into the theme of your book. Or it could just be going down to the local community center and renting a room and then promoting it from there. So I could go on and on about how to do a physical book launch, but that's really a very valuable thing to do. And you could sell anywhere from 25 to 150 books in a given day, and connect with your audience and build some buzz for your book. So I highly recommend you do a book launch, whether that be a physical one, or you could do the same thing in a similar setting to what we're doing today. So more about marketing. You can announce your book to any organizations you belong to. Be sure to put it in the signature on your email. because we're all sending out multiple emails every day, to craft an elevator pitch. And this is an elevator pitch is just a very quick statement about your book that's designed to get people interested in it. You're standing on the elevator, you've got 30 seconds. How are you going to get the person next to you interested in your book enough to go out and buy it? Or if you're lucky enough to be in front of somebody who wants to review your book in the media, you've got to be able to explain your book in a couple sentences or one paragraph. And you can have a longer presentation, that's fine, but initially you need to craft an elevator pitch so you can talk quickly about your book. And then also on Amazon, there are tons of books about marketing books. I would highly recommend that you check that out, and you'll get a lot of good ideas by reading those books. If you don't already have an author website, this is kind of your home base for marketing, because you'll put your landing page on that website. You'll connect your website to Amazon Author Central, which is a one-page site that Amazon gives you to say a little bit more about yourself. And then you can have a blog, you can put up all your books there, you can connect to social media. So it really becomes the hub of all your marketing activities. So it doesn't have to be a huge website, maybe 4 or 5 pages, a book description, something about you as the author, maybe a blog, a contact form. Those would be and the landing page that we talked about. So those 5 pages would be a good beginning website. And then you have to be your own best advocate. I realize that sometimes we as writers are a little bit more introverted, but if you're not excited about your book, nobody else is going to be excited about it. So you have to develop that attitude of being excited about your book and become your own best advocate. And the last idea that I want to leave you with is to have a written plan. So those that have the most success at marketing are those people that have a written plan. It doesn't mean you have to follow each and every thing that you've written down, but even just opening up a Word document and saying, okay, so the first week that my book is live, here's what I'm going to do. The second week, here's what I'm going to do. The third week, here's what I'm going to do. And have a 90-day plan at least, or a 120-day plan. You can always go in and change it. You can always decide not to do things, but that'll give you a map of the territory. It'll guide you through those first few weeks or first few months. And you'll have a clear vision of what you need to do. Otherwise, these things just become warm fuzzies, and you don't get to them. So have a written plan that'll help your success. And maybe that's something you can do on your own. Certainly, you could start it on your own. I've just given you about 10 ideas, and I'm sure you can find more either by talking to somebody like me, finding some other book marketing pro, those books on Amazon about book marketing, or through talking to your fellow writers about what's worked best for them. So create a written plan. You'll be glad that you did once your book is launched. So let's take a quick review here. Number one, you want to create a killer title and subtitle, create a killer cover, edit well, distribute widely, have a marketing plan, be your own best advocate, and keep writing. So, it's going to take some time to develop your career as an author. It generally doesn't happen on one book. It usually takes several. So keep writing. You could write, in the long form or in the short form, either way. And that will help build success for you over time. So before we get into questions, I just want you to know that if any of you would like to have a free 30-minute consultation with me, I'm happy to do so. Just send me an email at howard@letswritebooks.net. Again, that's howard@letswritebooks.net. And I'll be happy to set aside 30 minutes for you. Just mention the email that you were on the Zoom call with us today, and I'd be glad to set that up. You can also check out my website at letswritebooks.net, letswritebooks.net. And I'm happy to take any additional questions at this time.
Thanks, Howard. We have a few that I've saved, and we have a few
Great.
that just come in. Let me do the most recent ones first.
Absolutely.
So Alice asks, do blog tours work?
Well, I think you have to be, I have not personally used them, and there's a lot of mixed results around them. I think you have to see who who these who you have to say, excuse me, where these blogs are, what they are, and how many people are reading them. So, and what you're being charged. So if you're being charged, say, $2,000 and you're on 5 blogs, and each of those blogs has, 500 followers, I don't think it's going to result in much, and you're going to spend a lot of money doing that. On the other hand, if you're spending, say, $400 or $500 and you're getting in front of, you're on 10 blogs, and each of those blogs, has thousands of followers, then it might be worth doing. I personally have not done that. I've personally not done blog tours. They seem to have fallen out of favor a bit.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Bruce asks, what writing tools or programs would you recommend for creating the book before coming to your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And number one writing tool is Word. So whether you're going to a traditional publisher or to a company like mine that works with self-published authors, then it's essential that we get the manuscript in Word, because that's what we need to work from. So if you send us a PDF, we have to pull it out of the PDF and put it into Word. And Word also allows us to edit well. So there's editing tools there that the editor will need. So the editor is going through the document on his own or her own, but we're also using the tools, and we need to send it back to you. We need to send it back to you with comments that we can easily put on the page. We need to show you the changes that we use. Track changes, which some of you know, is a tool that shows where the edits are, and then you can respond to them accordingly. And there's a lot of things that we can do with Word to manipulate the document that we can't in other formats. And then also, that's the format that we need to give to the designer. So, or any company that's using a designer needs to give it to them from a Word document. So it's best to use Word, and that's something we all have on our computer.
Thank you. Yes. And a lot of writing programs do export to Word. Scrivener is one of those. So, don't discount using something that you're comfortable with simply because you're going to need a version in Word later. You can often overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. I mean, you definitely want to be able to go from Scrivener to Word, and I'm encouraged, to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. So early on, Jill asked, what if someone steals your idea? And I think this is when you were talking about being collaborative and finding good titles and subtitles and reaching out to that hive mind.
Yeah, great question. I've never seen it happen. And it's very possible that somebody could want to steal your stuff, but they're not you. They're not going to write the way that you are going to write something. And I honestly wouldn't worry about it. If you're really worried about just putting your idea out to people, then just keep it to people you know initially. But then it won't be a problem. I mean, if somebody wants to go through the effort, they'd have to go through some effort to steal your book and steal your idea. It's possible, even once you get your book published, it's possible for them to steal the title, put up a book with that title, and then put in a subtitle of their own. But very quickly, consumers, other readers will begin to leave reviews, that show the book is good or it isn't. And any author that's worth their weight is not going to steal your work. Anybody who's writing professionally is not going to steal your work.
Right.
But there's books with similar themes. I mean, just go to Amazon. There's 20 million books up there. You're probably not the only person who has the idea for what you have, but you're the only person who's going to write the way that you write. So don't worry too much about that.
Yeah, all of your words will be put together differently than someone else's words. So I think
absolutely, yeah.
It leads to our next question from Madeline, who asks, how hard do we need to work to avoid using an already published title? So there are a few that I know off the top of my head, like How the Light Gets In. That's a Louise Penny book. It's also been written by someone named Donald Harris, Katie Upperman, Jolena Petersham, I think is her name. Joyland was Stephen King books. Emily Schultz also published a book with exactly the same title. So what do you think about using titles that are already out there?
Well, I wouldn't use, I've done it, we've done it unintentionally sometimes, but so if you're going to use a title that's already out there, it's okay to do, again, long as the subtitle is different. Otherwise, then you're going to run into problems. And I would say to you, go to Amazon. If there's more than, say 6 or 7 books with the same title, I wouldn't use that title. Then you're going to start to get watered down. But if there's only a small handful of books with that title and your subtitle is different, of course your cover is going to be different, then go ahead and do it. But if it's more than, say, 7 or 8 that you see with the same title, I would come up with a different title.
Yeah, so a comment from Rich said that they'd have a right to steal it. Titles can't be copyrighted. So that's good. And then that leads to another question from Gerald, who asks if you could please give an example of a secondary title. You're talking about maybe a subtitle, I think he means.
I'm not sure.
Yes, I meant a subtitle. I used the wrong expression.
That's okay. No problem, Gerald.
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer your question. I mean, so let's go back to the, hang on a second. I'll show you some subtitles. Are you asking me what a subtitle looks like?
Excuse me. I don't know what a subtitle is. I've never heard of it
Okay.
before.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to show you. Hang on. Just bear with me a second here. Okay, you see my screen now where let's go to this book that says Overcoming the COVID Darkness. That's the title. The subtitle or secondary title is How Two Doctors Successfully Treated 7,000 Patients. The book underneath it says King Boss. I can't read the subtitle, but the subtitle is right underneath it, right there.
Yeah, so it's usually the title is shorter and a little bit more pithy maybe, and
Yes.
then the subtitle gives a little bit more depth to what the reader can expect from this book. So the
Absolutely.
title should be catchy, subtitles should provide a bit more information. Does that sound like it's a reasonable?
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Gerald.
Gerald had another question earlier. He asked if you could please explain if there's a way to change the title of a book if it's already been self-published on KDP.
Well, so this is a big question, because if you want to change the title, then you're going to change the record of the book. So paperback book is a problem. If you're going to change the title on a paperback book, then you're going to have to get a whole new ISBN and upload a whole new record. For the Kindle version of the book, I think you probably have to do the same. You probably have to unpublish and then republish the book. Or, yeah, you'd have to unpublish and then republish under the new name.
Yeah, there are some things I believe that are easier to do after a book has been e-published. We did have a meeting last month, MWA did, and we had 3 self-published authors. Any of you can go to the Mystery Writers of American NorCal Facebook page, look in the video section and find last month's presentation. I believe they all said titles, changing titles is problematic. Changing content or cleaning up or editing,
Right.
not so much. That can be
That's
done
right.
after the fact.
That's right. Yeah. And that's true to a certain extent with the paperback book. So you can probably change up to 20% of the interior of the paperback book and get that uploaded. But more than that, then you might get flagged and they may require a new book. And then in terms of the Kindle book, there is more flexibility with that. But keep in mind that the paperback book has to have an ISBN. The Kindle book does not have to have an ISBN because Amazon assigns their own number to it. And so there's a little bit more flexibility, but changing a title is problematic.
Okay, so I'd like us to continue these questions. I am going to stop the live stream push to Facebook now. There aren't any questions on Facebook, and I think we've covered a good representation of your presentation today. So I'm going to stop that live stream, and give me just a minute.